All right, we might make a start. So hello everyone, welcome. Thank you for joining us today for charting a new course for QCE Physics. Before we begin, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the many lands on which we create and share our learning resources. We acknowledge the traditional custodians as the original storytellers, teachers, and students of the land we call Australia. We pay our respects to elders past and present, and we also extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples joining us today. In today's workshop, we'll start by summarising some of the problems with the current Physics General Senior Syllabus, which I'm sure you're very familiar with. We'll then do a deep dive into changes to the structure and content of the new syllabus, and then we'll touch on how we'll be supporting you in your implementation. We'll introduce you to the new edition of Physics for Queensland, and then we'll have some time for questions. With that, I have the pleasure of introducing today's presenter, who I'm sure you're all very familiar with, Dr. Richard Walding. Over to you.
Right, thanks, Alina. Hello, everyone. I was talking to one of the other presenters earlier in the week, and she was saying, I feel so nervous about doing this presentation. And I said, don't be nervous, you're amongst friends. So to me, it's just like there's a whole bunch of you are just friends, and we're just having an afternoon chat about the new syllabus and the textbook and so on. So let's get onto this. Unfortunately, with this platform, the animations aren't working. So I spent a lot of time getting these really cool animations, but they're not working. So you'll just see slides, and I'll have to work through them. But the first point is about, what were the problems with the old syllabus? And I've been online with you with the discussion lists and Facebook group and hearing the concerns over the last 4 years. But QCAA does a major review every 10 years. So that was the 2019 for the new syllabus. And that was the review after, I think it was 2007 was the previous syllabus. And so that was the major reviews. This one is just a 5-year minor review. So really, all they're going to address, as I've put on the screen here, is the problems that you experienced, or we all experienced in interpreting the syllabus. There are a few hassles with interpretation. Bring it up to date with some of the ideas about teaching and assessment. Now, if you've read the new syllabus, you'll notice there's a whole chunk at the beginning about strategies for assessment and how best to prepare students for assessment. Allegedly, one of the problems was the workload with the current syllabus. So QCAA wanted to address that and to try and decrease the workload. Now, let me just step through these one at a time. One of the concerns was too much content. Now, if you're like me, you're trying to teach the unit 1 and 2 in basically 3 terms. So you're trying to work out what to leave out. And you didn't want to leave out stuff that would be necessary for the, unit 3 and 4. I mean, I'm talking the general syllabus at the moment, not the alternative. But you didn't want to leave out unit 3 and 4 stuff. So stuff that was useful for unit 3 and 4. But, I remember going through and teaching, you'd leave out mirrors. And I spent a month writing the chapter on mirrors, and I didn't even do it. So too much content was a big thing. Students used to say to me, have I covered everything for the external exam? Now, I was at one of the Griffith boot camps with Gordon Naidoo, and Gordon, I gather, is on here today. So, Gordon, I'm just talking about the boot camp, and students would come from many different schools, and they'd say, have I covered everything for the external exam? And they were never sure. And that was one of the concerns teachers have, that they prepared their students well, and the students were worried about the same thing. Another one that came up, and you've seen this on the discussion list, there were vague statements in the syllabus like, what's the importance, about you should be able to describe the importance of symmetry. Well, no one said what the importance was, and we had enormous trouble working out what on earth they meant. It sort of meant nothing, but they fixed that up. Some of the confusion about wording. One I struck when I was writing the chapters on elastic collisions and inelastic collisions, did that include explosions? Now, if you're like me, you probably all did explosions when you're doing conservation of momentum, conservation of kinetic energy. But the syllabus never really said it. So, I mean, most of you probably taught explosions just in case, but the syllabus has actually fixed that up now, or they sort of half fixed it, and I'll show you what later. The definition, there's a lot of emphasis on definitions. A list of physics definitions, hundreds of them in the glossary, and the teachers would say, do the students have to know this stuff word for word? And so that's one of the concerns teachers had. Then there were some odd definitions. If you remember this one about the antiparticle, the syllabus says it's got opposite spin, opposite charge and or opposite spin. Well, that's not always true. So that was not a very good definition. And then the next one was about polarization. What's this stuff at the end about differing in phase by 90 degrees? They talking about circular polarization, or did they mean differing in the orientation of the waves? I'm not quite sure what that meant. And then there were the formulas. Now, if you remember in the quantum physics one, there's the formula mv(r) nh on 2 pi. Were you supposed to be able to substitute and solve problems with that? It didn't tell you to, but you think, well, what's the purpose of it? And we were thinking, well, the mvr is just the angular momentum. So it's sort of saying angular momentum's quantized, which meets the Bohr model, but what do you have to do with it? Are you supposed to use it or not? So that's been attended to. And lastly, with the trouble with the ISMG, the one that said trends, patterns, or relationships, now that's been fixed, and it's now trends/patterns/relationships. So people were wondering, does that mean trends and patterns, or do you have to do the three, or is it just meaning one? Well, that's fixed up in the new syllabus, so that was good. And the best fit model, I'll come to that in a minute, but they've addressed the problems with working out the overall grade for a task. So let's have a quick look at what the new syllabus looks like rather than the problems with it. And okay, now one of the first things you'll notice is the guidance section is gone. So here's a little extract from the current syllabus, the 2019 syllabus, and you've got subject matter on the left, guidance on the right. Now that's gone. So the guidance was there. It was just guidance, as it says. It wasn't stuff you had to do, but you needed to take notice of it. So what they've done is include the guidance into the subject matter where it was relevant. Okay, so here's an example down the bottom here. The current syllabus for the AXZ nomenclature, the guidance was students should use it. Now, it didn't, in the subject matter, it didn't say that, as in the guidance. In the new syllabus, at the bottom on the right, you now describe the nuclides using the AXZ nomenclature. So it's actually included it into the subject matter rather than guidance. So that's really helpful. A couple more. The SHE has been expanded, and we'll go through that a little bit later, but they've added a lot of new bits and pieces to that, so that's turned out really well. And the science inquiry now has all the prac work. So the old idea of mandatory pracs and suggested pracs is gone. There's no mention. They've just got a list in the science inquiry which includes all of the prac work that used to be mandatory and suggested. And teachers often say, well, if it's not mandatory, do I have to do it? But I think David and Amber have made it pretty clear in the QCEA workshops that you don't have to do the practical work in the science inquiry, but if you're not going to do it, you need to do something that helps you meet all the requirements of the science inquiry objectives. So basically the simplest thing is to do them. And if you're not going to do them, you better do something that's equivalent into your teaching program. So, I think most of us will just do most of those pracs in there. Maybe not all, but most of them. And then the cognitive verbs I've got there has changed. They've clarified that. Now, I'll give you an example. In the green box there, it says the current syllabus, one in the electric circuits section is define resistance. And if you look up the glossary, it says what I've got written there, the ratio of the voltages and so on. Now, in the new syllabus, on the right, they've changed the cognitive verb from define to describe. So describe's a higher level word than define. Define basically is just restating something. Describe really is, in a lot of ways, it's defining plus some sort of elaboration to take it a bit further, some other characteristics of it. And so I've said there, it could be opposition to the flow of electric current in a circuit. Now, that's not a part of the old definition. The next part's the definition. So it's describing what's going on rather than just being a simple definition. And there was a good purpose for why they've changed from define to describe, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Now, to continue on, the glossary has gone. Like I said, there's only 2 definitions left in the syllabus, and that's the 0th law and the 1st law. So they're actually stated in the syllabus, and you could easily get one of those, even as a multi-choice in the external exam. And that's one students should know basically off by heart, because they're the 2 definitions left in the syllabus, as far as I can see. I've said here, what does that mean for teaching? Well, now you can put the terms or the description in your own words. You don't have to have the exact word from the glossary. I think some of the problem was in marking. Markers were only accepting glossary definitions as being correct and marking anything else wrong. And it's not sort of a good way to learn. It's better off being able to use your own words and describing the concept. So that's a good change. Here's a good example. Current syllabus on the left, define the strong nuclear force. Now, really, that's probably a multi-choice sort of question, would capture that. And I've just got the start of an example of what it could be. And so that's typical of a define question. Now, with the describe on the right, what you'll notice is it's a describe word. So it wouldn't be just, probably wouldn't be a multi-choice. It's more likely to be giving you, 2 marks. One for something to talk about the nuclear force, and then one is to describe the concept in more detail. And a question could be, like I've got about its relationship to nuclides. And let's move on. Now, the mandatory pracs, I've just talked about that, but here's an example. The current syllabus has a mandatory prac on the left, and that's from the heating unit. Okay, it just talks about what you should do and the linear trend lines and all the rest of it. And then underneath is the prac that goes with it. Oh, it's a prac, a suggested prac, which is about mixing 2 cups of water and measuring the temperatures and so on. But they talk about percentage error and so on. In the new syllabus, you'll notice they've got a similar sort of statement there, but the key thing I've got in red there, they've said all experimental measurements should be recorded this way, that is with significant figures and all that. Now, I think they're talking about the whole course, not just the heating unit. And so that means they're in the science inquiry, which is underneath that, it's much simpler. They just talk about the prac, but they've already flagged the idea that you should, record all your experimental measurements with uncertainty and all the rest of it. And I've just mentioned there, what do the changes mean for teaching? You can, it provides you with a lot more stuff for your data analysis questions. You can decide on which pracs to do and so on. You can leave some out if you want to, but you'd want to be really careful, I think. Excuse me. Okay. Now, I'll just step through these one at a time. I go fairly quickly. But we're talking about the IA2 and IA3. After 4 years of confirmation, and a lot of you have been to the workshops, even Canterbury College ones and various other places have done a lot of work giving some, ideas of how to mark or how to use the ISMGs for doing this. One of the changes they've made, and this I think you'll all think it's welcome, and they've got an uneven number of indicators for each achievement level or each performance. I suppose you'd call it performance level, such as we'd call it 5 to 6, or what it'll now be is 4 to 5. But so instead of having 4, for instance, 4 dot points or 4 dashes that you have to highlight, there's going to be an uneven number. So for the forming one, I think it's 5, and then the rest have 3. So you'll always have a majority or minority. They'll never be equal in any of the performance levels. So that'll make your working out the overall grade a lot easier. It doesn't make the marking any easier. And like QCA have said, the marking is the tricky part. Assigning an overall grade should be simple. And I know David's mentioned that many times. It should be simple. So you should look at the ISMG with all the highlights, and you should be able to just look at it and quickly come up with an overall grade. You shouldn't spend hours, or not hours, you shouldn't sort of have too many arguments. And I think with the uneven number of indicators, that's going to help. Communication has been taken away from being a separate criteria for the ISMG. It was always at the end with 2 marks. The communication syllabus objective has gone. Now, there's 7. In the current syllabus, there's 7 objectives. Communication was number 7. That's been merged into the other 6, and you'll find it it's scattered through it. But I think a lot of it's in the first one, which is on the describing theory and things like that. So it's been taken away. So that's now, when you look at the ISMG, you'll find communication in the first criteria, if you like, the forming and finding in the IA3. There's 2 dot points in there for communication. And the IA3 also has another dot point taken from communication in the evaluating section. So you look for them there. I think that'll work pretty well. They've spent a lot of time on it. They could never get it quite right, but I think what they've got looks pretty good. Look, I've mentioned about the unique research question has to be done individually. I think teachers occasionally say, can the whole group have the same research question? And I think David and Amber have been pretty clear on that no, it's got to be unique research question. Same claims, you can have the same claim, but different research question. Another, it's not so much a change to the syllabus, but it's a change that QCAA are promoting, and you can't let the evidence wander into another subject area. So you don't want to combine nuclear physics and cell biology, for instance, in a particular claim you're submitting. So a claim like nuclear radiation is harmful would be fine, but if you had nuclear radiation is harmful to the body, it's starting to wander off into cell biology. If that's allowed to go through, I think, and students don't do well because they get hammered for doing stuff that's not a part of Unit 4 physics. It won't be they're probably going to blame you or blame someone for allowing it at endorsement. So that's just a tip from QCAA, which seems to make a lot of sense. And another example was, is a PET scan better than a CT scan? That seems okay. It's about medicine, but it's not overlapping with other subjects. I mean, you can just talk about, basically radiation and how it's absorbed by different materials and so on. I've said there, avoid multiple parts. I think some of the problems with the IA3s have been where students have loaded up their research question with a whole lot of different things. I mean, in physics, it could be, something about special relativity. It could be about GPS, space travel, and the Large Hadron Collider. I mean, if you had those three things and you said relativity is necessary for the explanation of these or something like that, it's getting loaded up and it's going to suffer. So the advice has been keep it fairly straightforward. Okay, just a few more. The clarification of this syllabus itself should be a standalone document, so you can look at it and you should be able to devise your course based on the syllabus. But really, I think you need to look at the current syllabus for guidance for the new syllabus. For instance, the current, on the left, I've got the current syllabus. There's a statement there that you should represent spontaneous alpha, beta, and so on decay using the equations, and they've given the equations in the syllabus. Now, the new syllabus on the left, it says describe spontaneous alpha, beta, so on, using decay equations, but there's no further guidance. And the question is, what do you do? And I mean, what do I do as a writer for this section? They seem to be saying there's always gamma particles. On the right in the current syllabus, it says all three types of decay have gamma particles or gamma radiation produced. Now, there's a question on the discussion list a few weeks ago. I think one of the teachers was saying about the gamma, what's the source of the gamma and do we have to include it? Well, not all. The problem I've got is, not all decay or spontaneous reactions have gamma particles. For instance, the carbon-14 beta decay, no gamma particles produced. So it's going to be hard to know whether to add gamma particles or not. I'd say leave them out, and I don't think you'd be marked wrong by, well, it'd only be for the alternative sequence people anyway. I think you could it'd be okay to leave the gamma particles out. Now, I've mentioned that in the new text, about what to do there. Now, underneath that, I've got, on the left, I've got define half-life. And on the right, the new one, look, you'll notice the cognitive verb is now describe instead of define. It's describe the concept of half-life. But the syllabus guidance previously was that you need to say that each species of radionuclide has a specific half-life. Well, the new syllabus doesn't say that. It just says describe it. So I've said when I'm writing it, I said, I think you better, in the description of half-life, not only talk about what half-life is, but say those particular points from the guidance from the previous syllabus. So I think we've got to read, to get the subtleties of the new syllabus, we have to look at the old syllabus for guidance. So anyway, now here's a couple more. The current syllabus is on the left there. It just says solve radioactive decay problems using whole numbers of half-lives. And the guidance is the formula. And it says students should be able to recognize exponential decay. Don't worry about the other bit. Come over to the left, over to the right side now. The new syllabus says solve radioactive decay problems using the formula and other arithmetic or graphical methods. But look, there's no mention of whole numbers. So in other words, the problem is you could easily get a question, and you'd be advised to set questions in class where the answer is not a whole number of half-lives. So it's a lot harder. So it just says using other arithmetic or graphical methods. Now, you could take logs or you could change the base and you can do all sorts of things to solve that. One of the comments, I think Amber said, if you're really pushed, you could use trial and error. So students who just have no clue about using logs to solve that problem might just substitute some value for n and see whether it comes out to the right answer. If it doesn't, adjust the little n up or down until you get the right answer. And that might be the best for some students. They mightn't be able to do it any other way. Anyway, the other one over on the left is guidance for instantaneous velocity. Originally, it said calculate for linear graphs only. And you'll notice there, linear graphs only. The new one on the right, I've said it's deleted. So in other words, they're not giving the guidance that it's for linear graphs only. So you'd have to be able to do it for non-linear. So a curve, an ST graph that's a curve, and you'd have to draw your tangent and work out that. So that's a part, you know, I read into it. That's what could be expected. I know if you're working through the general syllabus, you wouldn't see that in the external exam, but there's plenty of people on the alternative sequence, and they'd have to be aware of that. The last row is a tricky one. Solve the kinetic energy problems involving elastic collisions and inelastic. Now that was, I mentioned that before, that was just what the syllabus has in the current syllabus. The new one has the word including explosions at the end. So I was flagging that idea that maybe you needed to do that. Well, now they've made it clear you have to be able to do it with explosions. But that raises a problem. That's this next slide. Top row. Current syllabus talks about conservation of momentum and collisions in 1D. New syllabus says that as well, but you know, it doesn't say anything about explosions for momentum. Now, I'm not quite sure how you'd do that, how you'd work out the velocity of a, you know, elastic or inelastic collision without using conservation of momentum for the explosion. So I'm reading into that the statement conservation of momentum and collisions in 1D also includes explosions. So I'm doing that. Next row is about Kepler's law and Newton's law. You'll notice in the new one, they've left the name Kepler out and the name Newton out. That's, you know, it's not, I don't think it's that controversial. What they're trying to do is to focus on the law rather than on the person and leave any talk about the people involved for the SHE component. And in the syllabus, in the content part, subject matter part, the subject matter, the science understanding part, just focus on the laws. So that's what they've done. But they admit, I know I was at a seminar where Amber was talking. She said, of course, people are going to call it Newton's law and Kepler's law. That's fine. And in the text, I've said that's fine. Now, the old one about the significance of some symmetry, this was an awful one. Now they've actually said what they mean by the symmetry, it's about conservation, and that's conservation of momentum, charge, lepton number, baryon number, and so on, mass, and so on. And the next one is the guidance from the old syllabus or the current syllabus. You never students didn't have to calculate lepton and baryon number. In the new one over here on the right, they say you have to be able to solve problems relating to the conservation of lepton and baryon numbers. Now, I'm trying to read into that. I'm trying to work out what they mean in terms of whether they have to be able to calculate lepton and baryon numbers, or just, if you're given them, make a comment about conservation. To me, I would, you know, my students, if I was teaching this, I'd be getting them to calculate lepton number and baryon number. They've taken the formulas out of the syllabus. The formulas used to be in the guidance. They've gone. I've put the formulas in the textbook, but they're pretty simple anyway. Okay, just a couple more. Now, the external assessment, there's probably nothing too controversial about the external assessment. I don't think there's any major changes. One thing I noticed is in the specifications, the current syllabus says responding to unseen data and or stimulus. Now I've said there the word responding could be any cognitive verb from, basically define or all the way through to, justification or something like that. The new syllabus just says interpret unseen stimulus. Now interprets, well, I've listed there what it means: interpret, analyze, and draw justified conclusions. So nothing, it's a bit more complex than the lower end of the cognitive verbs, whereas the current syllabus, it could be any cognitive verb. The new syllabus seems to be saying, and I could be wrong here, but that it's a little bit higher level. The unseen stimulus is higher level. So I've said over here on the left, the questions are likely to require more steps. So I'm thinking probably greater than 4 marks. Now, so they're more difficult questions. The trend over the past 4 years has been to combine scenarios. Now I've seen that. I've been a marker for 3 years, and I've just seen how the questions have gone. And you've looked at the past papers, you'd know. And I've looked at the alternative sequence past papers to get a feeling for Unit 1 and 2. And you can see what they're doing is combining different topics into a question. And what I've done here is I've got last year's paper 2, there's question 2 there, 5 marks. And when I saw that, I thought, oh, good God, how do you do that? Look at it. It's a combination of inclined planes and circular motion. And of course, the centripetal force provides the force up the incline and so on. So what they're going to do, I think, is look for different topics and try and combine. And what I've been trying to do is make a grid of all the different topics across the top and around the bottom and try to think of possible combinations for all the boxes of types of questions. And it gets a bit interesting, some of the things you could do. So lastly, what we're doing in the textbook, Alina will talk about, the rest of the material. I just talk roughly about the textbook. She'll talk about the textbook as well, but just want to make these points. Just, these are the questions that keep coming up. Someone said to me, is it just an update? Could I use the same book? Well, no, I don't think it'd be wise. There's lots of subtleties in the new syllabus that I think you need to be aware of. And the platform is going to be so much more exciting with what Oxford is doing. So it's not just an update, it's a complete revision. I've been through every word in the Unit 1 and 2 book and changed it where necessary. And I've had lots of feedback from teachers who are saying, oh, you made a mistake. Or students saying, you made a mistake, taking much pleasure in telling me that. Well, I fixed up any mistakes, and anything that doesn't appear clear, I've fixed up. So I've addressed all of those issues I talked about over the last 4 years. We've made sure all the subject matter is covered. Got the clear definitions, basically similar to the 2019 syllabus glossary, but tweaked where we had to. It's closer alignment with the syllabus. When I was writing the first one, the current text, some of the stuff hadn't come out from QCAA, and I was trying to write it a little bit blind, and I was not sure where to put various sections. Particularly in the heating, I was trying to do it in a really logical way, but what we've made it is closer to the syllabus. Well, it aligns perfectly with the syllabus now. So when you're trying to map it against the chapter numbers and the syllabus dot points and so on, it's going to be pretty easy. And I think Oxford are doing that anyway. The worked examples, now Alina will talk about some of those. We've shown the steps that the thinking and what you'd write on paper. All questions in the book. Now I think there's 1,300 questions or something like that in Unit 1 and 2. They've all got a marking guide, so there's marks for every question, and the worked examples will show you where the marks have been allocated based on what I've learned from the marking guides. The SHE topics are included into the text. I think not a lot of people had time to do the SHEs, so we've put them in as little half-page ones with a marking questions, being unseen stimulus material and a few questions with marks. And then there's some real-world sections with Q&A in the same way. They're like unseen stimulus. We've also highlighted scientists. There's QCA has put a lot of extra scientists in the syllabus, and we've tried to address, well, not all of them, but some of them, or most of them anyway. Look, here's an example. I'll just only spend a minute on this, of where in Unit 1 and 2, where you can have questions that combine topics. So the heating, I could combine heating and nuclear, and I could ask, how many fission events are needed to boil a litre of water or something like that, and you'd have to use your formulas from both topics. Or the next one is energy from a coil to heat water. You've been doing that anyway. And temperature of objects after a couple collision, if 2 1 kg steel balls collide head on, they're going 10 meters per second, and they remain coupled, what's the final temperature, or what's the change in temperature? It's not much, I'll tell you that. It needs an enormous speed to get up much temperature change. And then with nuclear, you could have beta decay being similar to a electron current or something like electron flow. Anyway, I've just put a few examples there. Look at the last one, electricity and heating. I thought, hey, you could talk about electric current of so many amps and whatever for so long, heating some salty water and how it changes the refractive index, and you'd be given formulas and stuff. So that'd be pretty neat. Lastly, every year I do a talk on how not to lose marks, not so much on how to get marks, but how to not lose them. Now I did that at the QCA, the STAQ talk at UQ in December, and also at Griffith's Cutting Edge STEM. So I did that last year, and the videos on that I've made, they're on YouTube. But also I do the same talk at the TS Expo coming up in July, and that was packed. It was great. All the students and their parents came to listen to a talk. I do the chem and physics, and Natalie Quinn does the bio and psychology. And as far as EA practice papers, I think I've made up 8 for Unit 1 and 2. There's one for each, basically for each topic and each unit, and then one for the whole of Unit 1 and 2. So and they've got mountains of EA-based questions in it. So that's taken forever to do. So hopefully that's useful. Oh, and I've just mentioned in the when you're reading through the text, I've got little study tips along the side. Be careful with this one. You'll need this next year in the PE or in grade Unit 3 and 4 in the standard model or whatever. So just helps teachers work out stuff they can't really afford to skip. Okay, now I might hand it back to Alina, and if you've got questions, you can always email me or on the discussion list or whatever, but we can take some more later on today. Okay, Alina, over to you.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Richard. I know that if I was a QCE physics teacher, I'd feel very, very reassured having you take us through all these key changes and knowing that you put in all the hard work to create the new edition. So with that, let me introduce you to the 4th edition of Physics for Queensland Units 1 to 4. The series can be purchased in a range of different configurations. We have the print product, student and teacher access to the digital, or you can purchase as a value pack, and Mel will speak to this a bit later. But first, I'll take you through the key features of the student books. These books now feature a new structure. So we've got units broken down into modules, and then the modules are broken further into lessons. We've been really conscious about reducing cognitive load by using accessible language and chunking content to better support learning and help guide your teaching. Each module is supported by a prior learning quiz, which assesses students on their existing learning and recommends support resources to help them get back up to speed before they jump into learning any new content. The physics toolkit, Richard's done a lot of work on as well. This has been expanded to provide more comprehensive coverage of the science inquiry skills, also with support for the internal and external assessments. Of course, the practicals are available to meet all your science inquiry requirements, and now we're also printing answers, short answers at the back of the book with full solutions available online. Unfortunately, we don't have time to talk about all of the features in detail, so I'm just going to highlight a few things. The first thing is learning intentions and success criteria. These are available to all students, and they're directly linked to checklists that students can use to self-assess against the success criteria. Richard mentioned this earlier, the worked examples. He's done a lot of work to transform these from their original format to now this walkthrough of the thinking steps, as well as what students need to be putting down on the page via the do column. These now feature a your turn component, which invites students to apply what they've learned from the example and use this in a brand new question. There's a huge emphasis on skills with opportunities for students to practice science inquiry skills using skill drills, which are placed within each lesson. So they're practicing skills in the context of the content, as well as data drills, which are essentially mini data tests in every module review. Richard also touched on this. We've transformed the Science as a Human Endeavour sections into real-world physics features. These also sit in context within the lessons, and they come with more targeted questions. All the surveys we've conducted have well, you've asked for more questions, so we've delivered on this. Not only do we have more questions, we now have mark allocations against each of them, so this really helps get students exam ready. An exciting new feature is the exam essentials, which sit within each unit review. These provide exam tips that model high and low scoring responses to exam questions with annotations highlighting how the tip has been used or hasn't been applied and that effect on the total marks that have been awarded. Students are then invited to think like an examiner by applying their understanding of the subject matter knowledge and their understanding of that exam tip that they've just looked at in order to mark an exam response. The marking guide is also provided to help them with this. Assessment success is also supported by a range of online resources, including practice exams, mock data tests, and samples for both IA 2 and 3. With that, we'll take a look at digital. So I'm really excited to announce that we've completely reimagined Oxford Digital. This new platform will support learning in new ways and offer loads of exciting tools and functionality to support more personalized learning experiences for your students and also make your lives easier. Content is fully accessible with questions and activities integrated into each lesson. We've done all the hard work to help you save time with online lesson plans, the live lesson mode, and enhanced reporting functionality. We also have 3 major partnerships to announce. So Quizlet replaces the old flashcard glossary. We're also working with Learnosity to author a wide range of interactive questions, including auto-marked and teacher-marked questions. The results from these assessments feed into curriculum reports, so you can easily monitor the performance of your students. And we've also partnered with ClickView to bring you a selection of syllabus-aligned videos, which you can access directly via the platform. With that, I'll just pass over to Mel to run over purchasing options and availability for the new series.
Looks like Mel's just having some tech issues there. Sorry, Alina.
That's all good.
Maybe we jump to the questions while we wait.
Sure. All right. I see we've got a whole bunch of questions. I'm just going to pull that up in just a second. Richard. Here we go. All right. So we've got a question from Mason. Do IA2 research questions also have to be unique, or is similar okay?
Okay. Hi, Mason. I don't think it's so much the research question that has to be unique. I think David's words at the webinars and seminars and so on, he must have said it over and over, must be sick of saying it, but it's the response has to allow for a unique response. So if you think of they're the sort of official words from QCAA, the research question has to allow for a unique response. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean the research question has to be unique, but I'm not going to speak on behalf of QCAA at all because I wouldn't have a clue. But I'd say in a class, you probably, a lot of them could be the same, but I guess you'd be trying to tweak them so that they can do a unique response. So I'm not going to say any more than that. You've said or is similar okay, and I think that's fine. But you'd have to really, if you're worried, take it up with Amber or David just to get that clarified at maybe one of the webinars coming up. Helena's question says, Helena, hi, IA2 is group work, whereas IA3 is individual. Well, not quite, because the syllabus says that IA3 can be group work up until the research question stage. So the syllabus, it actually says the following aspects of the task may be completed as a group. Now, this is IA3, selecting a claim, identifying the concepts, and conducting research. So that part can be done as a group, just the same as the IA2. Once you come to the research question, that has to be done individually, and then everything from there, preparing your response, is individual. So I think that's the answer for that one. Sarah, hi. The question about logs is a tricky one. Now, on the webinar recently, Amber addressed that issue, and she said students aren't required to be able to use logs in grade 11, or in the syllabus anyway. The syllabus doesn't require that, so that's true. So the question, how can the student do those fractional half-life questions if they don't have to use logs? She made it clear that they could use any technique they like. And if you look at the question from Sam underneath, where he says they can use graphic calculator to solve those, well, that's the way I imagine a lot would do it rather than taking logs. So, but if they're really pushed, they could use the trial and error, which, I mean, I don't think anyone would, but it's always there as an option. So Sam, I think I've answered that. The answer is yes, that you'd use your graphic calculator to do that. For the alternate sequence people, is there a document that links the chapters to the syllabus, the alternate sequence syllabus? I think QCA, Oxford is preparing that. They're working on that. I've talked to a few alternate sequence teachers about what they want, particularly Adam Warren, who's been really helpful in saying what he wants. And he's given advice, to me to pass on to Oxford about what he'd like. But and they can meet some of those needs, but there will be something that will link it for the alternate sequence. That's it's just hard to do because the alternate sequence changing from, it alternates, of course, from year to year, and it makes it a bit complicated. Combined questions available for the alternate sequence. There's nothing done officially through Oxford, but you would be able to not so much cut and paste, but you'll be able to select questions from the different, from the EAs that I've made up. I've made up EAs for Unit 1 and 2. I've finished those. Like I said, there's about 8 of them, and each one has, I don't know, probably 30 or more questions in it. You could just pick out the ones you wanted for that topic that's going to be in the EA for you for that year. So you can do that. But Oxford won't be doing that as far as I know. I don't think so. I think it gets too messy. Brian, thanks for this. The how would the combined questions affect? Well, again, I think you'd have to cut and paste yourself, or pick the questions. Tell the student which questions from which paper. Now you'd have access. Oxford would automatically give you access to all of those papers. They'll be online or somewhere in the text, which would be available online anyway. So you can it's not so much cut and paste, but indicate which ones the students will be used. Yeah, I agree, Paula. Thanks for that. The complex unfamiliar is much the same as those combining topics questions I was sort of floating. Look, this is not a plug for the Study Buddy particularly, but in the Study Buddy, I've purposely combined topics like that for the Unit 3 and 4 syllabus. That's the current syllabus. And I've done plenty of questions like that. Crystal, oh yeah, I mentioned that about the syllabus saying all experimental values should be recorded this way with measurement uncertainty. Are there assessment implications? Well, I think that'd be really for your data tests in terms of assessment, the IA1s. The IA2s and 3s well, IA2s particularly, you'd be recording all your experimental values that way. I mean, that's half the IA2. For the external exam, well, they wouldn't be looking back at the experimental work to do uncertainty in that way for the external exam. But I think the assessment implications would possibly be just the IA1s. But anyway, I think that's the best answer I could give there. Now, Alina is going to answer this one about the ClickView subscription.
Yes, my understanding is that because the videos are embedded into the platform, you will not need a subscription to view them. And then the next question about the format of the OBook. So the new, in 2025. So this is next year with the new platform for Units 1 and 2. If they're using the existing Year 12 text, which would be the case because we wouldn't have published the new one just yet, it would be on the old platform, but the new Unit 3 and 4 book will be on the new platform.
Keep going.
Yep, we've got one more. I assume that it is not a functionality available for the AS syllabus. Yes, at the moment, we're not creating a brand new platform for the alternative sequence, but as Richard said, we're working on a mapping document to help support you with the alternative sequence.
I don't think there's any more for me.
I think that's all right so far. We've got Mel online. Hi, Mel.
Oh, sorry about that, everyone. That was a debacle, a bit of a technical issue. Okay, I apologise. So, Bryn, what are we up to? Okay. I am the consultant in Queensland. So I do Gold Coast, Brisbane South, Toowoomba, and the regions out near Toowoomba. Chris Lowcox, I'll put our names up here. He does the north side of Brisbane and Cairns region, or the region of Bundaberg, Mackay, and I also do Northern Territory. So that's our contact details there. I'll just go over whether we speak about study guides. Do we speak about that?
We haven't just yet. No. Do you need some? Yeah.
Okay. Hopefully you can still hear me. There's our study guides. Richard wrote the physics one, fantastic. So they're available for $29.95 each, free shipping to the students. So if you just want to contact Chris or myself, then we can organise for you to have a complimentary copy if you haven't got one already. When it comes to pricing, if you can just note our details down again, we had final pricing today. There's a lot of buying options that you can have. So it's probably best to contact us. We've got some deals going if you buy 3 or more subjects, that come across to Oxford, 3 or more subjects. The other thing that I wanted to highlight with everyone is everything that Alina showed you in the Oxford Digital. It's really important that classes need to be set up online. So we work with our third-party providers, which is some of you might be using MyConnect from Campion or ReCloud or Box of Books. You need to be aware that Campion and Box of Books do not set up online classes. So all those features that you saw today, you need an online class set up, and that's where Chris and I come into it to assist you, to train you on the platform. So if you go through our partners, they will set the students up and they'll set the teachers up separately, but Oxford need to actually set up the online classes, and that's where you can run reports, assign works, get results and all those things.
All right, thanks, Mel. Appreciate you pushing through despite the tech issues, but we're all good. We're all good. All right. Thank you for attending today. We'd also love to get your feedback, so please hang around. I believe there will be some sort of evaluation form. Otherwise, thank you so much for your attendance today and for your attention, and have a really lovely remainder of your day.
Thanks, everyone.